Okay, so hello all and welcome to, I already lost my spot in the notes. There we go. All right. Hello all and welcome to this live stream of the Zoom meetup of the vidwheel Creator Network meeting featuring Carl Richards. Thank you all for joining us. This is one of our Thursday Zoom meetups, and they are the public-facing part of the vidwheel Creator Network, or VCN. What is the VCN? It's a group that brings together solopreneurs who aspire to take our businesses to the next level using self-produced video. We draw on the experience of the group itself and industry experts to guide you through the process of making video and making it work for your business, giving you better reach, efficiency, and growth. If you find that intriguing, join us for our next one of these meetings, our next Zoom meetup. It's featuring Ed Troxel, titled How to Create Your First Video in Less Than 10 Minutes. That meeting is on August 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and you can find it at that and all upcoming events at events.vidwheel.com. There should be a link in the description of this live stream, and there's one in the chat for folks who are here in person. We do have a bonus live stream this month for First Videos Month, and that's also with Megan Vaughn, a marketer and TikToker. That'll be a Q&A live stream, and that is at 12:15 Eastern on the 11th of August. Again, events.vidwheel.com. All right, we're moving on to the main event. Today, we are going to hear from podcaster and podcast producer, and producer in general, I believe, Carl Richards, presenting Get Video Podcast Ready, 5 Myths Holding You Back from Success. Carl, are you ready?
I'm all set. I don't need to share a screen. I'm good to go.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Carl Richards, and essentially what I do is I help coaches, consultants, and other subject matter experts who don't think they have the time or the technical know-how to launch or create a podcast or even start thinking about it. I help them get launched, but then I maintain their show as well. So they can stay in their, what we refer to as the zone of genius. So they can stay in that space, but then also allow themselves to elevate their brand, their business, and credibility, and be seen as the go-to expert. And I've had a chance to chat with some of the members of vidwheel in one of the breakout rooms, and great to hear that a few of them already have podcasts, which is fantastic. Quite often when I do these presentations, a number of people don't have podcasts because it's still one of those things in the marketing space that's still in the ether. A lot of people still don't know what a podcast is. And when you start trying to explain it to them, they automatically throw their hands up in the air and go, "That's too confusing for me. I don't have the time for any of that. That's just not for my brand or my business." By the way, those are the same reasons why a lot of people didn't launch websites 15 years ago. If you can think of that in terms of practicality, where would we be now in 2022? This recording is in August of 2022. Where would we be in business now without some type of digital presence, online presence, especially a website? Most of us couldn't run our businesses if we didn't have that. So what I want to share with you today is what we here at Podcast Solutions Made Simple have created, and that's the 5 myths that are really holding you back from really getting into that space. When we talk about podcasts, we do work with both video and audio. For the purpose of this meeting, for the purpose of this meeting, we're talking a lot about video and how you can not only repurpose your content, but get it out there. So the number one myth that a lot of people think of is the money myth. And the money myth isn't the dollars and cents of it. Yes, it can come into that a little bit, but the bigger part of the money myth is the ROI, and that's not seeing the value in it. A lot of people come to the podcasting space expecting that their podcast is going to make them money. And they're quite confused and surprised when I say to them that, well, you know what? It takes a long time to be a video sensation, and it doesn't typically happen overnight. So instead of looking at it that way, how is my podcast going to make me money? Let's look at how you can use the podcast as a way to create, awareness or get in front of your ideal client so that the so that in doing so, it's going to make your business money. It's going to bring revenue into your business. So that's the money myth. The second myth is the competition myth. You've probably heard this in other areas too. There's too many out there already. There's market saturation. Well, we know there are a ton of audio podcasts, about 4 million worldwide, a lot of video podcasts as well. Here's the thing. How many websites are out there? Anybody know? Anybody want to hazard a guess? I counted this morning. Actually, no, I didn't. There are millions and millions, if not in the billions of websites, but that doesn't stop us from launching a website. It doesn't stop us from getting into the virtual space where we know we should be, okay? The other part of the competition myth is people will say, well, there's a lot out there already and I'm just not that well known. And look at this person that's already a coach and consultant and everyone knows who they are. There's no room for me. Well, of course there is. It's just really stepping into that space and really owning it and saying that, yes, I do have something to say. I do want to put my product out there in the video world and my programs and services so people can find me and see me. And it does create that social proof. People want that social proof. People want that know, like, and trust factor. So you have to get the competition myth out of your mind and just do it. I know I sound like Nike, but literally just do it and to be. The third myth is the content myth. What am I ever going to talk about? You know, I've got nothing. Well, you know what? If you've been in this business, in your business for a while, you have content. You have some kind of content. There's content on your website that you can always pull from, but there's also your programs, your services, your regular things that you do on a regular basis. Your blogs, for example, that's content. Your videos that you're already doing, that you're putting out there in clip form, that's content. You can make that longer form content. So there is no shortage of content when it comes to, it's just a matter of how do you reframe it or how do you repurpose it for a podcast so that it is presented as a podcast. The fourth myth is the tech myth. And it's great to see so many people in the VCN network that are already, handling technology and doing it very well. But some people come to this space and they say, it's too technical, it's too confusing, I don't know how I'm going to manage it, so therefore I'm not going to do it. Same thing I mentioned before about websites. If we had to build our own websites, most of us would just shy away from it. But thankfully, there are experts out there that can do it. I also say it's like me trying to fix my car. And maybe this is you. You flip the hood, you look at the engine and go, look, that's an engine. Don't know why it's not working. And then what do? You take it to the person who knows how to do it. So it's the same thing with the technology and all of those things. If you ever have a question, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the person who you know will probably have the answer. That's probably somebody who has worked on video or worked with in the podcasting space before, who can give you the right advice and point you in the direction that is going to be beneficial, not only to you to get things ramped up, but to maintain it and then be seen as that expert that you want to know, that you want to be seen as. And one of the big ones that comes back quite often is the time myth. I just don't have the time. You know what? I wish there were 26 hours in a day. Whenever that happens, I'm going to find something to do with those 2 hours. It probably won't be productive, because that's the case for most of us, right? We always find ways to be unproductive, but if we found ways that we could manage our time better, and this is not a time management conversation. I'm not going to do the whole, there are 168 hours in a week and how much time do you need to eat and sleep. I'm not going to go down that road, because we know that there are ways that we can find the time to do the things we want to do. Ask someone who gets a gym membership in January and then stops going to the gym middle of February. It's not that they didn't have the time, it wasn't a priority, or there was some misconception. So in the podcasting space, it's a misconception of how long a podcast needs to be. And when I ask this question, and I'll ask this question right now, you can put it in the chat, or if you feel comfortable even just shouting out the answers, that's fine too. But how long should a podcast episode be? What's your best guess with how long a podcast episode should be? I'll just put that out there as a question, and you can give me your responses. Neil, you're looking right like you're going to hazard a guess.
Yeah,
Sean?
I used to do them. I used to aim for what Sean said there, 20, 25 minutes. And my whole reason was that was the length of a Buffalo commute is what I usually said. So that was my thing behind it.
That's a great answer. Sean and Neil both saying about 20, 25 minutes. Any other guesses? Any other answers? Sean saying attention span. Yep.
There's some things coming in from LinkedIn. Alex Sheridan
Okay.
says 5 to 60 minutes. He's got a good range there.
That's a good range. Yep, 5 to 60 minutes. Okay. Sheridan, that's a great answer, actually. Here's the honest truth. There are 2-minute podcasts out there, and there are 2 and 3 hour podcasts out there. So let's frame it another way. How much time do you think your prospects, clients, or ideal clients have to pay attention to give you their time to listen or to watch what you have to offer them? And that might go back to what both Neil and Sean said earlier, and Sheridan too, where they said, Sheridan, you said between 5 and 60 minutes. I'm going to bring you down a little bit and say that 20 to 25 minute mark, that's actually the sweet spot for a podcast. But if it's shorter, that's okay. It's okay if it's a little bit shorter. It's okay if it's a little bit long. How long is my client or prospect going to engage me? And if you already have some, if you have some fame to your name already, like if you're Oprah Winfrey, people will watch Oprah Winfrey for a very long time. But if you're Carl Richards, guess what? It might not be a full 2 hours. It might only be 20 or 25 minutes, and that's okay too. But then when we look at the back end of things, because some people say, I don't have time, I can do the recording, but I don't know about the working on the back end. That's going to take too much time. Let me tell you this, it takes less time to record and edit a 2 to 10 minute podcast or a 20-minute podcast than it does a 2-hour podcast. Stands to reason, right? So think of it that way. Think of it, how long, number one is how long can my prospect or my client pay attention to me? And also, how much time do I have, if I'm doing it myself, how much time do I have to dedicate on the back end? And if you don't have time on the back end, that's where, again, we mentioned that you can take it to the professional to have you, to have that done for you. And there are a number of people that come to us for that very reason. So those are the 5 myths: time, money, competition, content, tech, and time. And once you eliminate all those myths, then it's really easy to see that, yes, I can have a podcast. I just have to think about how I'm going to make it, how I'm going to frame it so it's reflective of my brand, my business, my values, and where I want to go with it. What's the purpose of it? And for most people, a podcast, the people who we work with anyhow, the purpose is they want to either elevate their credibility, they want to draw more awareness, they want to build more business from it, they want to bring in more clients. So it becomes a way for them to get more leads. So once you recognize that, now you can structure your content accordingly. To get going, though, what we do is we've created a system called the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are really, really simple. The first P is pre-production. That's where we sit down and we basically plan everything out with you. We come up with your launch strategy. We figure out how you're going to put that podcast out there. Is it going to be live? Is it going to be recorded? How much editing? How long? What's your launch date? We actually commit you to a date so that it just doesn't stay on a shelf somewhere, that you actually do get your show launched. And part of that is also a marketing strategy. It's letting people know that you have this show that you're doing. The second P is production. And that's where we actually start to create the content. You're recording, then we're editing it for you, or you're editing it yourself, and then you're packaging it together so it's the best version of you going out there. And then the third P is post-production. And that's not only is that the rinse repeat, but that's then the marketing. That's the who do I need to get in front of to share this information with. It's not just about uploading it to YouTube and then repurposing it on other platforms. It's about making sure that you're getting it out there on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on, you're putting clips out, short clips on Instagram. You're utilizing other, you're making sure that the information is also going out to your email lists and other networking groups that you're a part of. All right. I'm going to leave it at that and say then that's the space that we work in. We really work in helping people not only get rid of those myths and those misconceptions, but really help people, really hit the ground running and get a good lead on getting in front of their ideal clients right from the beginning, and then building out their show so they can achieve their goals, whether they be, brand awareness, business awareness, or certainly building their clientele. So that's really the space we work in. And Neil, I'll ask if there are any questions, I guess. That's a good time to do it, I think.
Yeah, this is a great time to do it. So if anybody in the meeting has questions, everybody's hiding behind their no other live feeds between other than you and I, Carl, but you all can throw them in the chat, and then we've got a pretty active LinkedIn live going too. So if anybody out there has a question, feel free to pop it in the chat and I'll get it to Carl. Oh, and if nobody does, then I get to do my questions, which is always good. So
and Neil always has questions.
I always have questions.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay, let's see. So I mean the overall kind of discussion on the LinkedIn is distribution is what it's all about. So I wonder, distribution, and then comment from Taylor on marketing as well. Do you have how do you distribute? Do you use one of the services? Like I internally use Buzzsprout to distribute across podcast networks, and then we distribute on video channels as well. What do you all use?
Yeah, that's exactly what I use. Buzzsprout is my favorite for audio because it does go out to, I believe it's 20 different platforms. The nice thing about Buzzsprout now, they've added a couple of different features. So if you do have a video version of your podcast, which I know a lot of people here do, they have a link right there. So it's not the actual icon like some of the other ones, but there's a link that says, hey, you can catch the YouTube version of it or the video version of it. So it's right there in Buzzsprout. So that's a handy tool. But I also make sure that I'm utilizing my social media channels correctly. That's another huge one for distribution. And I know we can get into the weeds with which one is the best one. And we're streaming live right now on LinkedIn. So if you're a savvy business person and you want distribution, this would be a good place certainly to do it. That's how I promote my show. I will promote it on Facebook. I will promote it in 3 basic places: Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The only reason why I promote on Twitter is because I've had a Twitter account forever and I've created a following with it. Same with Facebook. But a lot of the time I'm finding that where I'm going to share the video and get the best results from it, and it's not the whole video, by the way, it's usually just an audiogram, which is technically a video. It's just an audiogram, so a promo piece with the link that goes right to the episode. And that's very useful, I find, in various groups on LinkedIn and various communities as well. But the other thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is if we're also incorporating it in a blog, because there are a lot of people that will do video blogs as well, or mix their blog and video together, that we're making sure that that's going out to our list on a regular basis. So that's a huge part of distribution, is sending it out that way. The biggest mistake you can make is not telling people you have a podcast. And you would be surprised how many people who are getting into the podcasting space don't tell people they have a podcast. And even just by saying it here in this space makes all the difference in the world.
And saying it more than once, right? I've been guilty of that sometimes, where I put out an episode, it goes through its distribution on Buzzsprout, it does a little bit on YouTube, but the clips and the continued mentions and pushing people back to it can be really helpful.
Consistently,
yeah. Bernhard here's got any info about price range for services?
Absolutely. Just put all your money in an envelope and send it to me. I'm sure it's enough. What currency is it in? Maybe I should ask that first before you just stuff it in an envelope and send it to me. There's low end and there's high end, but we work with clients that for video, and we do rough cut video because we find that we want to leave a lot of the human element in there. So we don't want to do a whole Hollywood style production editing. It takes too long, to be honest. But if that's what's within your wheelhouse for investment, the price obviously goes up. But typically we can work with, so the low end is 2 episodes a month, video and audio. We'll do both rough cut video and audio for just shy of 400 Canadian. So I think that's about 300 American, I think. Somewhere around there, if I'm not mistaken. And what that is with the euro, I'm not sure, but certainly in that space for sure. And again, it depends on what you need. I always say do a show every week. Some want to do one every 2 weeks. Again, it depends on how long that show is too. So usually the price can go up or down depending on how long your show is. So if it's only 5 or 10 minutes, it's probably going to be in and around that 250 to 300 mark. If it's an hour and a half or 2 hour long podcast, and where it is all of the editing. So it's all of the back end work.
Oops. That's fine. Can contact me on LinkedIn, please.
Yeah, we'll
Absolutely.
get you to we'll get you two set up. USD and euro are about on par at the moment, as far as I know too.
Are they? Okay.
That's my exchange information.
Yeah. Bitcoin don't lie because it's not stable enough, but we can take stable coin as well. So
okay. I'll leave that to you two to figure out. I do have a couple other things here. So Alex Sheridan, I think he's agreeing with you how you repurpose and make sure that those repurposed clips are contextual to the platforms that you post on.
Yeah.
That's really important, and I definitely agree with that. Right? You don't put clips that belong on TikTok on LinkedIn. Maybe that's not a bad. Maybe that's a bad example. You might
sometimes
do,
they
but
do.
You know
sometimes
what I mean.
we're seeing a lot of that now. It's the clips being shared from TikTok into the Instagram space. For
Instagram and there's more and more of that. You just got to know who you're posting to and why you're putting it there. I think that's a great point. Taylor said, should I make a website for it? So should someone make a website specifically dedicated to their podcast?
That's a very good question. And I'm sorry, was it Taylor?
Taylor, yeah. So Taylor's on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Taylor, that's a very good question. And I'm so glad you asked that. There's a couple different schools of thought here. And there's, I don't want to say old school thinking, but it is kind of old school because I think a lot of people back in the early days of podcasting, also the early days of websites, were creating websites just for their podcast. And though there's nothing wrong with that, I think what we want to do at the end of the day, if we're using our podcast to draw people to our business, it makes sense to have a page on our business site, on our business website that links to the podcast. And by the way, if you're using, Neil has talked about Buzzsprout, if you're using whatever the platform is that you're using, you can grab the URL and link to that, or you can have a web person develop a pretty snazzy looking podcasting page on your existing website for probably a very small amount of money, because it's just a matter of not URLs, but also embed codes and stuff like that. But once it's there, it's just a matter of some editing to update the show notes and stuff on a regular basis. And that's usually fairly straightforward. So I would say, yes, website, but use your existing website.
Right. A page on the website works well.
I like
Buzzsprout does. If you sign up for it as a service, they'll give you a website that then if it's me, because Sean and I both have the vanity domain names that you redirect to whatever website you need, right? So sure. That works well. Bernhard's landing page. I think that's where it's at. That's
absolutely
spot on. So
spot on there. The big thing I just want to throw in here too is when we start looking at and talking about exploring all of these aspects about, how am I going to put this together? It really goes to what you're currently doing in your business now. So if you're already creating content in your business on a regular basis, blog posts, Facebook Lives, whatever it is you're doing, I know people that line up their whole year with the content they're going to put out there on their social media platforms and send to their email list. What you're doing on your podcast should ideally match that, so that when you're talking about it, you're not trying to talk about too many different things in the same space. And if it's all similar conversation, it's easier for people to keep up with what it is that you're doing, as opposed to just spinning the wheel and randomly hoping that something's going to land. So if you're consistently creating content and you have a strategy for it, that's going to make it easier for us to work with you within that strategy. But that's also going to help you as well when it comes to the marketing piece and the distribution.
I think overall that's good advice for all marketing, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of if you have a broader marketing strategy, it makes it easier to figure out how to do your podcast, your other content pieces, and everything that comes with it. Sean
sure.
did ask a question in the chat here, sort of a question. How do you feel about a LinkedIn page dedicated to your podcast? Right.
That's a good question. I haven't, I'll be totally transparent. I haven't dove into that space yet. I set up a Facebook page back when I launched my first podcast, because that's just what you did. So now I'm looking at the prospect of, as I'm launching my second podcast, which will be all about podcasting, by the way, and it's going to launch this fall, about having that dedicated space within LinkedIn. And I know you can do that now. I don't think you could do that the same way 4 or 5 years ago. Other podcasts, I think the pages and stuff has evolved since then. So should you have a dedicated profile on LinkedIn for the podcast? I think that, yeah, you should. Absolutely.
I can say I've got a somewhat a story where I did when LinkedIn came out with those what they call them, showcase pages, and they were meant to like showcase specific services or products you had within your business, but they're like connected to a company page. I had, for a short time, I had one of those for my podcast, and I decided to just lump it all back into one. So I don't know if that is good advice or bad, but that is my personal experience with it, right? So
I think the other thing you can do, rather than creating a separate page, is if you already have a business page on LinkedIn, I believe that can live in that space as well.
Yeah, that's what we do now. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You could just keep going with that. Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions that come to mind? And Bernard, I think we kind of answered the one that you had there with our discussion about LinkedIn pages. Yeah, I agree. Too much to keep track of. That's why I pulled it all back down to one. As a larger, and I'm just talking without reading the comment. Bernhard said for a solopreneur, it can be too much to keep track of all that. That's what I found was business page, personal page, spotlight pages. Just, you never get to posting to all of them and everything like that. So,
and are you ever really on the right page?
Right. And then you end up posting, right? You end up posting to a different page when you didn't mean to. That'll happen too. So
anyone that's listening or watching too in the space, if you're not quite ready to launch your podcast, I'm going to post my information in the chat so you'll be able to see it there. But if you're not quite ready, the other thing that a lot of people are doing is they're being guests on other people's shows, be them audio shows or be them video shows. So look for those opportunities as well. We've actually built a community and we're in the process of building it, that connects guests and hosts together. So we're all going to post the link for our next meeting. You're more than welcome to check it out, complimentary, and see if it's a space for you. It's a great way to get started and get your best version of you out there into the podcasting space.
Actually, that brings up another question I have. I'm just checking my chats to make sure I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. But I recently had a discussion with somebody, and their strategy was that they were going to guest on as many podcasts as they could before they launched their own, right? To get comfortable, to get an idea of how it all worked with people, to maybe even build a little more of a following, and then launch off on their own. How do you feel about that as a strategy? Seems smart to me.
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. I think it's a lot to launch at first, and it's a great thing if you can get every time you speak, you get better, right? And think of a podcast as a speaking opportunity. Then if you're speaking on somebody else's podcast, you don't have to worry about, did I hit record? Is everything set up? Did I set the appointment right? You don't have to worry about that. You just have to show up for the recording, whenever, or for the live session. But really, it's an opportunity to get your feet wet, meet some people, promote yourself, get in the podcasting space. So get out there, see how the process is working. And then you can, even as you're getting closer to even getting set to get your podcast out there, you can start talking about the fact that most hosts will not mind if you say, oh yeah, by the way, my video series or my podcast is going to be starting in mid-October. They won't mind because they'll want to support you.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a great strategy.
Excellent. We do have another question here. So Bernhard's asking, how do you get invited to podcasts in general? Do you have a strategy for getting invites? And I know you mentioned your group, which is a great way to do it. Sure. What if you didn't know about the group or wanted to take a different approach? You got any thoughts there?
Yeah, there are a couple of different, there's one called podmatch.com. I think they work mostly in the audio space, but there are some other groups that do exist that do connect guests and hosts. I think putting yourself out there and letting people know that you are available to be guests on other people's shows is ideal. And I think if it's you're just saying you run under the employment sections, okay. I think there's what some people are doing. If they already have their own show, they're also saying that on their show page that they're available to be guests, and they're always looking for guests. So that's another option too. But definitely there are some connection groups, not just mine. Mine's fairly new, but there are some that have been very successful for the last 4 or 5 years that really work to connect guests and hosts. The other thing that you can do, and I've seen a lot of coaches and consultants do this, is they'll hire basically a podcast headhunter to do the dirty work of finding shows that you can be on. So that's something that you can hire someone to do, to get you on shows that match your brand and your business and what you talk about. And I get requests like that probably 4 or 5 a week. Even in the summer months, I'm getting quite a few to ask to be on my show.
Okay. Hireable podcast detectives. Do you see that, Carl? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, there are hireable podcast detectives out there. So I think as in to find shows for you, yes, I don't know any of them off the top of my head without going into my email and going through the ones that have reached out to me, but I can certainly connect you up with one. We also have the capability of doing that in our space as well. So if you need help finding shows to be on, we can help you with that too.
I'm going to add one more little tidbit there too, which is like, it happens more and more with all the social engagement and, like meetings like this and everything. Everybody's a human, right? So if you find a podcast that really, speaks to you, like, I wouldn't be afraid to just reach out directly. And, if you can start that conversation on LinkedIn or something, you'll probably find a lot more yeses than you would think, right? So.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes how it happens.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. You got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I think that's the main problem when you think about starting a podcast, it's the same when you open up your first time your LinkedIn profile to get that organic traction, to get that audience. And with a podcast, it's the same. So I will check back with you, Neil, privately, and also with you, Carl, and maybe Sean, because I think that's something that would help and benefit the podcast community a lot. If there was somebody like that, like a detective or a headhunter or a bulletin board or whatever, because it would help. It would help a lot. Those people, you don't. I mean, for me, I don't have time to go looking out to search who has a podcast, who's working the topics that I would like to work with, or the company that is maybe interested in participating in those podcasts. It's a full-time job.
Yeah, it is, and that's why people will hire a headhunter, so to speak, to find the right shows for you to be on. And that's the people who, and again, there are a few of them out there that have reached out to me, so I can't remember the actual company names off the top of my head. It's also something that we can help you with. But if you want to go with an actual headhunter company, then we can certainly find one for you.
No, what I really like about it, sorry Neil, if I take the
word
again.
Go for it.
What I really like about the session today is maybe we can get together, because I'm working on a specific project which includes podcasting, production. Content has never been an issue, and recording. It's like, let's put it, push record, let it roll, and that's it. I mean, it's not a movie. We're not in for the Oscars, and we know that in the timeline, either be it Facebook, be it LinkedIn, it's ephemeral. It's there for one. You see it once and it's gone. It's like with the old-fashioned video production when we used to do company videos or videos for conventions or for special events. It's a one-time see only budget. It's not for company history. So I would love to get together and have a meeting maybe next week.
All right.
The project.
Cool.
You guys will love this project.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's get it rolling. But with that, I think we are going to shut down the questioning here. Carl, if you want to stick around after and anybody has other things, we can do that. But as far as the live streaming Q&A, we're going to go ahead and shut it down. Carl, great info there. Thank you to everyone who participated and threw in comments and questions. Thank you to all of you that checked out the live stream, and to everybody who was here live with us in the meeting. And my 2 cents on podcasting is that it's one of the easiest ways to create some high quality content, because all you got to do is talk to somebody smarter than you and record it. And with that, I will say have a good night to you out there in the streaming community.